Hello and welcome. My name is Simon from CramTheExam, and in this video today we're going to have a look at part 4 of the speaking exam for the FCE and CAE speaking papers. So if you want to find out what the exam is all about, how to prepare for the exam and how to give yourself the best possible chance of getting the highest marks, then watch this video. Okay, so as always, let's start off with asking ourselves, what's the aim of the question? Well, this is an in-depth analysis of the topic which you looked at in question 3. So if you had a look at environment in question 3, then question 4, which happens straight after part 3, or question 3, will be about the same topic. So if you had success talking about the environment, for example, in question 3, question 4 should be a breeze. If, however, you had a bit of a stinker with the topic in question 3, then there is a chance to resurrect your score if you can come up with some novel ideas and expressions and ways to talk about the topic for question number 4. Because in question number 4, it's all about expressing and justifying your opinions. So expressing an opinion and then being able to justify it. And if you can, have a conversation with yourself where you look at the pros and cons of the situation, agree with perhaps something that was talked about earlier on or disagree. And when I say disagree with yourself, what I'm really talking about is having a look at the pros and cons. So on one hand this, on the other hand this. One positive might be this, on the other hand it might be this. So if you can get into a conversation with yourself at this stage, then you're giving yourself a good chance to show off the vocabulary that perhaps you didn't use earlier on in the exam. If you did use that vocabulary earlier on in the exam, then this simply reinforces the fact that you know what you're talking about. Now, this is individual, so one person will be asked one question, then another person will be asked another question. There is a possibility for a third question in both exams where the examiner will ask you to, or motion or show you that they want you to have a conversation. So although this is individual, there could be a conversation element to this. Now, I'm not exactly sure how this works because, as I'll go through the basics in a few seconds, there's only a few minutes for this part of the exam. So if you talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and the other person talks and talks and talks and talks, then it might be the case that there's not enough time for the group conversation. But if you give a short answer, because that's all you can think of, for example, and the other person gives a short answer, then this group question, this conversation, will be another chance for you to score some high marks. So it's individual and possibly a group conversation as well. So how do you prepare for part 4? Well, you've got to learn how to have an opinion and how to express it. It seems really simple, but this is actually quite difficult, and you can train yourself to do this. For example, you can have a look at your textbook and have a look at the units in the textbook, and it'll either be 10 units, 12 units or 14 units depending on the course book that you have. And you've got to think of opinions based on all of those units. So if the first unit is, we've done environment, so let's say the first unit is about IT, the second unit is about friends and family, something like this, then you should be able to have a look at a topic and come up with a couple of ideas straight away. If you haven't got a course book, you can have a look at the media. BBC News, other news websites, have a look at a headline and just come up straight away with 2 or 3 opinions or 2 or 3 ideas. And that's how you practice for part 4, because there's not that much time to sit and think and go, The question is asked, what's your opinion? You've got to give an opinion. 2 opinions, 3 opinions, pro, con, and you've got to do that quite quickly. So it is something that you can train for, and I ask you to do so. And it's not too difficult to have an opinion, as I'm sure you probably have got an opinion about everything there is in the world. There's an expression, opinions are like ... You can look up this expression for yourself. Everyone has one of these, which means that everyone has an opinion for just about everything. And just out of this context of an exam, so if you weren't in an exam, but if you were talking to your friends or talking to anyone else for that matter, and there was a topic, then I'm sure you would have plenty to say about that topic. Just because you're in an exam doesn't mean that you should suddenly have no idea what to say about a particular topic. You should, of course, get used to the idea of speaking for as long as possible until the examiner stops you. I've said here, learn to speak for 2 minutes. It might be the case that the examiner only lets you speak for 1 minute or only lets you speak for about 90 seconds. But certainly sitting down with a stopwatch, online timer, whatever you've got, and talk about topics, number of opinions, pro con, and see if you can get to 2 minutes. And the more you practice it, of course, the easier that this will become. One good way to speak for 2 minutes is to play the game Why, which is a bit of a silly game, but it's a good training for this. And that is where you come up with an opinion and someone asks you or you ask yourself, why? And then you respond to that question, and then the next question is why, and so on. I'm sure if you've had, if you remember when you were younger, or you can remember a particularly annoying child who just keeps on saying why, well, that's actually quite good training for part 4 of the exam. So it allows you to keep on thinking and allows you to keep on developing your ideas, and that's exactly what we need here for part 4. So what are the basics? Well, for the FCE First B2, you've got 4 minutes in total, which means it's 2 minutes each if you talk for the full 2 minutes or up until the point the examiner stops you. For the CAE, you're looking at 5 minutes in total, so you've got about 2.5 minutes each. Of course, as I said, the topics are related to question 3, so don't expect anything too different from what you're going to get in question 3. The examiner has a script. We'll have a look at that script in a second. We'll have a look at some questions that you might be asked. Now, the key important thing is that you're assessed on your English, you're not assessed on your ideas. What does this mean? It means that you can say anything you want as long as you can justify it. So come up with anything at all. It doesn't have to be what you really think. It could be a complete lie, as long as you're able to express it and justify it. I think this because, or I believe this to be the case because, or some other language of justification, and just go into it. Very often when you start justifying something, and you automatically find the next thing that you want to say. And that goes back to the preparation process, where you're asking yourself all of the time, why, or how many opinions can I think of about this topic? And talking actually makes you talk more. So this is one good advantage. One good thing I should say is that once you start talking, just keep on going, and as I said, keep timing yourself. So just talk until you hit 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes, and then use modern technology. So get yourself set up with a smartphone, record yourself, either the video or the audio, doesn't make a difference. Video is actually a bit better because it's scary. You might be able to handle listening to yourself, but actually watching yourself talking is a slightly different kettle of fish. But review it. Ask yourself, what could I have said? What's nonsense? What could I have avoided? How can I learn from this? And that's the great thing about being able to record yourself and learn and develop from that. Okay, so I talked about the scripts, and this is the script for the FCE. You can see here that there is no introductory phase to part 4. It continues straight away after part 3. So at the end of part 3, the examiner takes back the book that you've been looking at, which has got the prompts in it, and then straight away goes into these questions. Do you think you have to spend a lot of money to have a good holiday? Why not? And then, you try to speak for as long as you can on that before the examiner stops you. And then the examiner might ask the person sitting next to you those 3 questions in the box. What do you think? Do you agree? And you? So be prepared to respond straight away to the same question. So when the other person is talking, don't just switch off. You're paying attention. You're involved. You're listening to what the person is saying, and you get bonus points, I think, for responding directly to what the other person says. So you can quote that person. You can say, well, I agree, or I disagree, or I agree in some part but disagree in other parts, or something like this, to show that it's not just 2 separate conversations, but that is one conversation and that you're reacting to it. So one person gets one question. Do you think you have to spend a lot of money to have a good holiday? And then then you get that little extra question, and then that person gets the next question. For example, it might be, some people say we travel too much these days and shouldn't go on so many holidays. What do you think? Then you've got 1 minute. Then you've got 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes to say as much as you can about this topic. And as you can see, if you're talking about holidays and traveling too much, I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone should be able to speak for 2.5 minutes on that. It's not too difficult to come up with 5 or 6 ideas on this area. And of course, the other person is still paying attention. The other person isn't thinking, God, it's over, thank you. You're still might be engaged, so you're still listening, and you still have to be ready to respond. Now, it might be the case that you don't speak for 1 minute, the other person doesn't speak for 1 minute, and you've got 4 minutes or 5 minutes for this part of the exam. So this is where that group question might come in. So the examiner might choose, for example, why do you think people like to go away on holiday? And generally, the examiner will motion for both of you to talk. So the examiner might do something like this. Obviously not with this daft face expression, but might kind of show you with his or her hands that they want you to talk about this. So take that cue and get stuck into the conversation. And here's the script for the CAE, and you can see it's exactly the same idea. First person gets asked the question straight away after part 3. Do you think it's important to have good communication skills to do a job well? Why not? And then the other person gets a follow-up question, as you can see in the box. What do you agree? Do you agree? How about you? And then it flips over, and then the other person gets a question to answer, and then the other person has to respond to one of those questions. So it's exactly the same as the FCE, and it gives you just a final chance to show off your language skills. And just like the FCE, if you don't speak for long enough, or if there's enough time, the examiner will give you a question for you to discuss as a pair, and will signal for you to do exactly that. And then once the examiner calls the exam to a close, the examiner says thank you, that's the end of the test, and you can all breathe a sigh of relief. And that, as they say, is all there is to it. So now we've had a look at, over the last 4 weeks, we've had a look at each part of the speaking exam for FCE and CAE. So what we're going to do from next week is we're going to break it down, and we're going to look more specifically at other people and how they have done the speaking test part by part, where I'll break down the video that we'll see. I'll give you my analysis, my commentary, give you through a few extra hints and tips. Hopefully they'll be, through watching other people do the exam for FCE and CAE, hopefully there'll be something that you can take away. Hopefully you'll see the mistakes you'll want to avoid. So straight away when you begin your preparation and your training for the speaking exam, you're already a few steps ahead. So I'll see you again next week, where we have a look at part 1 again, and we'll break it down in some more detail. See you then.